The version of this story that Caitlin Clark's detractors so much wanted to be real exists. Raven Johnson and Clark secretly despise one another. The Indiana Fever front staff made a disastrous error in selecting Johnson, the girl who claimed Clark broke her, and the locker room is a powder keg. For weeks, they vigorously promoted that narrative and many people fell for it. However, this is what those individuals weren't anticipating. A decisive preseason victory over Nigeria in which Raven Johnson gave her all, applying defensive pressure the entire game and led the team in thefts and rebounds. After the game, he went to the microphone and utterly destroyed every narrative they had created. Following the Indiana Fever's decisive victory over the Nigerian national team, Raven Johnson just crushed the people who despise Caitlin Clark. How do you feel about the connection between Caitlin and Raven? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. You talked about the relationship you're developing with Caitlin. I'm just wondering how things have been since you have shown such curiosity, and it seems that Caitlin has been quite receptive to that. Let's return to the beginning of this discussion before moving on to the remainder of the interview. Iowa will play South Carolina in the 2023 NCAA Tournament Final Four, the same match in which Iowa overcame the unbeaten South Carolina squad to go to the NCAA championships for the first time. At the three-point line, Caitlin Clark dismisses Raven Johnson. Nor was it a subtle move. On national television, Clark effectively informed Johnson that she was unable to make that shot under duress. Johnson missed it, and she thought about it for a very long time. 2 weeks prior to the 2026 draft, Johnson took a seat in front of a camera and talked candidly about it. She said that Clark had broken her. She referred to it as disrespectful. These are not gentle words. And because the haters knew exactly what was about to happen, they stowed them away like ammunition after hearing every word of them. Caitlin Clark would likely be another hardship. Take a look at how well Caitlin Clark is utilizing Raven Johnson. Caitlin Clark's left side. She doesn't even give her a glance. She seems to be saying, "I don't care about you. I'm not defending you," by waving her hand. This is one of the reasons I now despise the internet. As if I had been beaten. I was harassed. I received all these things that I wasn't, such as being like a monkey or something else I'm not sure about. Little things like that. And I believe that at the time I wanted to give up basketball and withdraw into a small bubble of solitude to be by myself. In the 2026 WNBA draft, pick number 10, a Raven Johnson of the Indiana Fever. The story machine went into overdrive the moment that selection dropped. And we're not talking about people saying, "Oh, this is an interesting dynamic to watch." Rather, it was as soon as training camp hadn't even begun and the locker room was already on fire. 3 particular tales spread quickly and widely. First, the wavy-off moment had never been forgiven, and Clark and Johnson privately hated one another. Second, Clark had already started driving players out of Indiana and was poisonous. Third, and this is really crazy, Johnson was the superior player, and Clark ought to be benched in favor of a rookie who has never played in a professional game. Raven Johnson and Caitlin Clark have a long history together, and they must now work together on the Fever. When Fever selected Raven Johnson in the first round of the 2026 WNBA draft, the majority of people immediately focused on her relationship with Caitlin Clark. When Iowa faced South Carolina in the 2023 Final Four, Clark and Johnson guarded one another. When Clark was guarding Johnson during that game, she essentially taunted her to shoot from the three-point line. At one point, she even waved her off. Johnson received a lot of criticism on social media for not being a three-point shooter at the time. Additionally, she stated in a podcast last month that she even thought about giving up basketball due to the hate she got. However, Johnson and the Gamecocks overcame Clark and the Hawkeyes in the 2024 National Championship game, demonstrating the area's true competitive heritage. They will now compete against one another every day during practice, making them more than just teammates. These stories proliferated because the college rivalry provided them with enough authentic history to seem plausible. Therefore, there was no real reason for casual fans who weren't watching training camp film to doubt any of it. The toxic Clark tale was by far the most dishonest. That story did not originate from within the fevered organization. Not a single fragment of it. It was put together using out-of-context videos, unreliable anonymous sources, and the widespread belief that Clark was the reason behind any uncomfortable events that occurred close to her.
Reporting is not what that is. That's
Simply starting with the conclusion and going backward. Do you recall this from Cheryl Swoops? Y'all, that's not my point. There's a lot of other going on that players are like, this isn't where I want to be over there.
Yeah.
There are some new things going on around there. A lot. So, you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team. They're like, I don't want to be here. This is where I want to be. The Johnsons should start taking required even more creative thinking because it asked everyone to ignore what Clark does on a basketball court every night and act as though a rookie had already passed her based only on potential and a college highlight reel. All of these narratives had one thing in common. The people pushing them had no access to what was actually going on inside Indiana's facility. Stephanie White and the coaching staff drafted Johnson 10th. Caitlin is a player who can play both on and off the ball, and Raven is a point guard who has mostly had the ball in her hands, so I think it gives us some versatility. Fortunately, having a couple different guards allows us to allow Kelsey to rest a little bit too, so I think we'll have a pretty good rotation when they have full knowledge of that college history because they watched her tape and ran the numbers on what her defensive instincts do next to Clark's offense. When it comes to our perimeter players, especially in the 1-2 spot, I think it will give us a lot of different ways to play, a lot of different matchups that we can play against, and we can get different looks, so I think it's going to be really important. We can also go with a defensive lineup, and when you have someone like Raven, the story was built on what these two players used to beat each other, not a single frame of what they'd actually. Aaliyah Boston was injured at Unrivaled earlier this year, and the Nigeria game was the first time she and Clark actually shared a court in a live game setting since July 2025, almost a year apart. These two have a pre-game ritual before every game, a specific back-and-forth exchange, and when they ran it before the Nigeria tip-off, you're going to be incredible as you are incredible. You're going to be amazing because you are amazing. Going the other way, Clark is going behind the back. Oh, it's Boston, and they have won. I think I would beat Caitlin for sure. Okay.
yes.
I'll show her my range. Oh, AB is getting better and better, like you see with every game. She's a fantastic basketball player, but she's also a great person. She's a great leader in our locker room.
She's always had my back.
She's been there for me, through the beginning of the season when games are great, when games aren't great. She just keeps getting better for me. For example, coming here to Indianapolis was one of the things I was most excited about getting the chance to play with her.
Can rely on.
The Fever shared a video of them cuddling on Instagram, writing, OBCC pregame hugs are so back. Suddenly, everything was right in the world. Clark commented after reposting it. Boston isn't simply a teammate Clark happens to like. She's the key component that makes Clark's pick-and-roll game truly deadly. That's not a publicity stunt. That's someone who honestly missed playing with her teammate and wasn't afraid to say it out loud. The pick-and-roll strategy that Indiana's offense has been using for the past 2 years, in which Boston sets the screen and then rolls into a position that forces the defense to choose between stopping Clark's drive or recovering to Boston at the rim, only works if Boston is healthy and correctly reads Clark. When Boston is out, defenses are free to cheat on Clark because they don't have to respect the roll threat. Look at Boston brings the ball up the floor and then hands it off to Caitlin Clark. Once Boston is back on the court, that coverage disappears. Clark played 12 minutes against Nigeria and finished with 12 points and 4 assists. On paper, it appears to be a quiet performance, but if you watch those 12 minutes back, you'll see that Nigeria was scrambling the entire time she was out there. She wasn't forcing anything, ran the offense at a pace that kept the defense uncomfortable, found the open player quickly, and ended the game with Indiana in complete control.
Doing so,
Clark is still searching for her first points here tonight, and she scores them. Kelsey Mitchell scored 17 points and shot flawlessly the entire night, which is exactly what you want from her in a game like this. Mitchell's value isn't just the points she scores, it's that defenses have to follow her all the way out to the perimeter, which opens up the middle of the floor for Clark and Boston to operate. The floor becomes much more forgiving for everyone else. They're still shooting at 73% from the field. Mitchell's handoff was busted, and she hit a three and a foul. Mitchell got action. Sophie Cunningham brought physicality and continued to move without the ball, which is what makes Indiana's spacing work rather than just look good on a whiteboard of her game, something she's been working hard on. This time, it's Clark who comes up with the steal in Cunningham's hands. She will pull up and drop the trip. This is the pace and speed. Michaela Timpson was effective in her minutes, scored without going overboard, and demonstrated that she can run the system rather than fight against it. Way off some screens. Boston has the size advantage.
Kick out.
Clark shot a fake three inside for Timpson. That was pretty. And a foul. Then there's Dyrus Dantas, who struggled throughout 2025, and many people genuinely questioned whether her three-point shooting was simply gone going into this preseason. Against Nigeria, she went 4 for 6 from 3. After a year in which hitting from deep felt like a distant memory for her, that's a number worth sitting with. If that stroke is truly back, Indiana has a stretch option that defenses can't ignore at the arc, which alters the geometry of every play that Clark and Boston run together. The floor opens up differently when a big can knock down threes, because the defense can't just pack the paint and wait. However, there is a serious injury concern, and it's important to be honest about it. Monique Billings left the Nigerian game with an apparent ankle injury, and no one was able to determine the severity afterward. Lexi Hall is. Even with those concerns, the Nigeria game revealed a feverish team that is deeper than most people gave them credit for, with multiple players contributing in real ways and Clark running a coordinated offense in limited minutes. Justine Pat, a sharpshooter Indiana was counting on for spacing, is also out with a leg injury. The most memorable performance from that game, however, didn't come from the scoring column at all. Welcome back. Feels good. Dubs Moss in the chat. Next one's a real one. 5 steals in one preseason game against Dallas, 7 rebounds against Nigeria. That's not what a team in chaos looks like, nor what a locker room falling apart produces on the court. Johnson's defensive instincts, particularly the way she reads passing lanes before the pass occurs, gets into ball handlers' space and makes them uncomfortable, and then pushes the pace going the other way in transition, are what Indiana's coaching staff fell in love with on tape before she played a single regular season minute as a member of the Indiana Fever. That's the piece this team was missing next to Clark's offense. Engine. You need someone who makes the opposing team's guards miserable on every possession. Johnson does that naturally. Steph, what did you think of just the energy that Raven brought you for the second consecutive preseason game, especially when it came to playmaking? You see the steals all the time, but the offensive side, I love her energy, and you know that the thing I love about Raven is like there was a possession in front of our bench where she turned it over. She didn't sit there and pout and sulk, so she got that thing back, right? Like, she's going to bring energy. She's going to be a spark off the bench. It's going to ebb and flow throughout the season as it does with many rookies, but at the same time, we know she's going to bring it on the defensive end. I mean, 5 steals, 5 assists, really good. She led the Fever in both rebounds and steals against Nigeria, and she was doing all of that while also handling ball handling duties and stretches, filling in as a secondary playmaker when the offense needed a breather. Stephanie White has been talking about that versatility since draft night, and Johnson actually delivered it on the floor, which isn't something that every rookie does when the real games start. White called her a spark after one of the earlier preseason games and mentioned that Johnson asks great questions, which may sound like a compliment, but coaches have noticed that first in players who develop quickly. That's a whole different level of engagement for most rookies at this stage. Johnson isn't just running the play that's called, she's asking why that play works in that situation. So, I mean, that's what she can bring to this team, is that defensive mindset. She's picking up 94 feet every time she's in. And, I think just her continuing to do that will be huge for us.
Clark has talked about this same thing.
In several media appearances during training camp, she has been candid about the fact that she still asks her coach questions every single day because, in her words, I still need to learn. She has also talked about wanting to pass that same approach along, saying that she's trying to be that not only for Raven, but also for the other rookies and new players on this team. Therefore, Johnson's mentorship isn't coming from Clark being courteous. Rather, it's coming from someone who still acts that way herself and White has already experimented with 3 guard sets using Clark, Mitchell, and Johnson together, and she has viewed Johnson as a primary defensive disruptor who can cover multiple positions without the offense losing its structure. That's a real lineup option, not a practice curiosity. Building on that, Caitlin, Raven made a joke at the media day that she asked you 1,000 questions on the first day of training camp. What's that relationship like, as she's been asking questions and you're kind of being the mentor a little bit? Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of happening so fast. I remember when I was a rookie, and the terminology is like the hardest thing to kind of understand, like the WNBA is completely different from what you play in college. And, I think there are coaches who have played for a while, and that's because she expects us to assist the younger players, and that's what we're going to do, and what we want to do. And here's where it gets interesting from a tactical standpoint. Johnson's rapid pace during transitions forces opposing defenses to quickly reorganize and sprint back, which is precisely the scenario where Clark's decision-making becomes problematic for opponents. Clark's ability to read a disorganized defense at full speed is really difficult to stop. The injury picture still looms over all of this, though. Hull's hamstring is being carefully managed, Pat's leg injury has her out, Billings left the Nigeria game without an ankle issue, and no one provided a clear timeline after the game. If Billings and Pat miss real time during the regular season, Indiana's forward depth gets stretched thin, and the margin for error on that roster shrinks quickly. Asking questions is the best way to learn. I still ask the coach questions every day because I still need to learn, and I'm trying to be that not only for Raven but also for the other rookies or new players on this team, regardless of whether you've played in this league for 10 years or not. And there are people who are still learning our system. So I've been trying to help her, and she asked a lot of really great questions, and as a point guard, it's a whole other burden. Raven Johnson called Caitlin Clark the GOAT once more after the Nigeria blowout. Remember how she said this in practice? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. The vote right on the line. Not in a she's pretty good kind of way, but directly, specifically, and without hesitation. Well, Raven said it again, framing Clark as her mentor and talking about how Clark had taken her under her wing from the first day of training camp. She's loving, like she's a goofy person, and I think a lot of people don't really know her outside of basketball. Outside of basketball, she's funny, like she has so much personality, and I think that's what people need to know about her. Her personality goes a long way, and she's a great person, and I think that goes like she helps me through every little thing. Someone who spent weeks building the story of these two hating each other was suddenly reporting on a team that didn't exist. She has a sense of humor that makes me laugh too, and I'm like, hey, where did that come from? So I think it's like simply playing with someone like her. I think that's where we kind of match together and we vibe with each other, so I love being here with her. Consider what it truly costs. It's like tiny stuff like that. But I'm also hilarious, too. Johnson to say that in public. 2 weeks prior to the draft, she sat in front of a camera and told the world that Clark broke her and disrespected her, and she used both of those words on purpose because she meant them. That's not a small thing to walk back. Therefore, when she stands at a post-game microphone and calls that same person the GOAT and her mentor, it's not a PR team telling her what to say. That's someone who spent a month in a gym with Clark every single day, observed how Clark actually acts in a locker room, and came out the other side with an entirely different perspective on her, and Clark's perspective has been consistent from the beginning. Throughout training camp and the preseason, she has spoken positively about Johnson, complimented her questions, discussed her defensive energy, and stated that she genuinely cares about being a part of Johnson's development. None of those statements came across as forced or staged. Clark has been candid about continuing to ask her own coaches questions on a daily basis, and she has directly linked that to wanting the same thing for the new players. Building on that, how much do you think competitors fear? For example, both of you want to win a championship. Have you played a lot of big games against each other, trying to win big games? So, how quickly did you kind of marry those two ideas of, like, we're teammates now, it's time to go try to win here? You don't manufacture that kind of consistency across weeks of media sessions without it eventually cracking, and it never cracked. Yes, I put the past behind me. To be honest, when I put on the Indiana Fever jersey, I said, let's try to win a championship together. I believe that's all she talks about with her. She talks a lot about professional habits like the tiny margin for room in finals games, so I'm just telling her that I want to do whatever it takes to win. Like, I want to win a championship, and that's really the big goal for me and my teammates. What's actually happening inside the Indiana Fever right now is a backcourt duo that genuinely likes each other, with Clark actively investing time in Johnson's development and Johnson giving everything she has on the defensive end in return. Stephanie White's post-game remarks following Nigeria fit perfectly into that picture, pointing out defensive improvement and transition urgency as the things that still need work before opening night against Dallas. Raven Johnson calling Clark the GOAT didn't just put an end to the locker room drama story. It completely flipped it because the player the haters used as their primary piece of evidence that Clark ruins relationships turned out to be the player who publicly described Clark as the most positive influence on her early professional career. The haters built a powder keg, handed Raven Johnson the match, and she used it to burn there. The 2026 Indiana Fever aren't just Caitlin Clark's team anymore. Clark is coaching a defensive disruptor who calls her the GOAT, and Boston's back is running pick and rolls that defenses genuinely can't handle. Dyrus Dantas just went 4 for 6 from 3 after a year in which her shot appeared to be completely gone. Hall and Pat need to recover. Billings' ankle needs to clear, and none of this is proven until real regular. What do you think of Caitlin's and Raven's relationship? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Season games begin on May 9th with opening night against Dallas. That's when everything the preseason built either holds up or it doesn't. Click the video on the screen, and we'll see you in the upcoming